No one tells boys what really happens during puberty. They tell them to grow up, to be strong, to figure it out, but they never tell them what it feels like, the confusion, the pressure, the silence, and while everyone's busy talking to girls, boys are left wondering, what's wrong with me? This isn't just about body changes, it's about the emotional storm no one prepares them for. Let's talk about that. Ladies, gentlemen, and especially to the young men listening right now, let's talk about something nobody really talks about. Something every boy goes through, but few ever understand, puberty. Now before you roll your eyes or assume this is just about changes, stop, because what happens to boys during puberty is more than just body odor and a deeper voice. It's a transformation, and unfortunately it's one society often leaves boys to face, alone. See, when a girl hits puberty, the world rallies around her. She gets the talk. She gets pads, support, maybe even a celebration of her womanhood. But when a boy hits puberty, he gets silence, confusion, and a whole lot of man up. What no one tells boys is that puberty hits like a storm, and it doesn't just change the body, it reshapes the mind, the emotions, and the way the world sees you. You start feeling things more intensely. Anger, jealousy, pride, attraction. It all comes rushing in like a wave, and instead of someone guiding you through it, most boys are told, handle it, don't cry, be tough. Let me ask you this, how does a boy learn to handle the pressure of masculinity if no one ever teaches him what it means to feel? Because what really happens during puberty is this. A boy begins the search for identity. He wants to be seen as a man, but he's not one yet, and no one gives him a roadmap. He starts getting erections at random moments. He doesn't even understand why. He might feel embarrassed just walking into a room because his voice cracked or his face exploded in acne. And let's not even begin with the pressure of performance, academically, physically, even sexually, and in that awkward silence, he turns to the internet, to friends who are just as confused as he is. To YouTube videos, late night websites, or worse, porn, because he's desperate for answers, but instead of guidance, he gets noise. What's worse, no one talks to boys about emotional changes, about how hormones affect not just your body, but your heart. You feel rejected more deeply. You crave validation. You want to be seen, to be respected, to matter. But the world keeps saying, you're a guy, you'll figure it out. And many don't. So what happens to boys during puberty? They grow physically, but many shrink emotionally. They develop muscles, but often lose their voice. They chase status and forget self-worth. This silence is dangerous, because when you don't talk to a boy about what's happening inside of him, you teach him to bury his truth. And buried things don't die. They come back stronger, angrier, and sometimes broken. Let's be honest, some of you listening right now are grown men, still carrying the confusion you felt at 13. Still asking questions that should have been answered years ago, and some of you are young boys going through it, wondering if what you feel makes you weak. It doesn't. Here's the truth. Puberty is not just a rite of passage. It's the doorway to self-awareness. But boys need to be taught how to walk through that door, with guidance, with permission to feel, with conversations that go beyond just be a man. Because masculinity isn't about shutting down, it's about showing up. With all the awkwardness, all the emotions, all the curiosity, all the realness, and if no one else will say it, let me be the one to say it to every boy listening right now. You're not broken, you're becoming. When a boy hits puberty, it's not just his body that starts to change. It's his entire reality. He wakes up one day and suddenly nothing feels familiar. His voice cracks mid-sentence. Hair begins to grow in places he never paid attention to before. His skin breaks out and his once childlike frame starts shifting into something broader, more angular, more man. but while the body is making noise, society stays silent, and that silence is where confusion begins. What no one tells him is that the physical changes are only one small piece of the puzzle. Underneath the surface, there's a storm of emotions, questions, and insecurities raging, and most boys are never taught how to handle it. He starts feeling things he's never felt before, sudden bursts of anger he can't explain, a deep sense of embarrassment over things no one else even notices. Attraction becomes intense, sometimes even overwhelming, but no one has ever had an honest conversation with him about desire. About what it is, about how to understand it, about how to manage it, so he learns to bury it, or worse. He lets it control him, and when he tries to speak up, he's met with cliches. You're a guy, you'll be fine. Man up. Don't be soft. It teaches him that emotions are weaknesses. That asking questions is shameful, that crying is for girls. He learns early that silence is safer than vulnerability. But what that really does is create boys who feel like they're drowning in a sea of changes, pretending they're okay when they're not. In school, the changes become even more confusing. Suddenly, he's noticing girls in a way he never did before. His mind wanders in class, his body betrays him with arousal he can't control, and it becomes easier to feel like something's wrong with him. But no one's talking about it, not in a real way. The education system throws a few charts at him, talks about hormones and hygiene, but skips over the emotional side, the real side. No one explains why his confidence dips one moment and surges the next. Why he starts caring about how others see him more than how he sees himself. Why he starts comparing his body, his voice, his height, his athleticism, all of it, to other boys. He starts to feel pressure. To be strong, to be noticed, to be impressive, to be the guy who gets the girl, who has the answers, who doesn't show fear. So he builds a mask. He learns to laugh off his pain, to hide his confusion behind jokes, to nod along even when he's lost. And because no one checks in, because no one gives him space to speak, he assumes this is what growing up means: pretend, perform, push through, but the real damage is happening inside. That little boy who once felt free to cry when he scraped his knee, who once spoke without shame, who once played without pressure, he begins to fade, replaced by a version of himself that is quieter, harder, more guarded. Not because he's becoming a man, but because he's been told that's the only way to survive. Puberty doesn't just stretch a boy's limbs, it stretches his mind. He begins thinking deeper, questioning his worth, wondering where he fits in the world. But those thoughts get buried under the weight of societal expectations. And when no one gives him permission to talk about them, he turns to the only places that seem willing to answer his questions: the internet, peers who are just as confused, or the fantasy world of social media. He starts shaping his identity around the loudest voices, not the wisest ones, and in the process he begins to drift from who he really is. As a boy enters puberty, one of the most overlooked yet critical experiences he faces is the deep emotional conflict that begins to build inside him. It's a kind of inner tug-of war between who he was and who he is expected to become. Before this stage, life was relatively simple. Emotions were pure, reactions were innocent, and his identity was still forming without much resistance. But suddenly there's a shift. He begins to feel emotions that he can't explain: jealousy, pride, shame, guilt, and they're all magnified by the hormonal changes happening in his body. What makes it worse is the absence of conversations about these emotions. People often speak to girls about emotional intelligence, mood swings, and self-care, but boys are expected to suppress, to handle it quietly, and to not make a scene. This is the point where many boys begin to believe that vulnerability is a liability. They are told to man up, a phrase that sounds empowering but is often used to shut them down. They begin to internalize the idea that expressing emotion equals weakness. So when they feel overwhelmed, instead of asking for help, they isolate. Instead of crying, they break things. Instead of talking, they go silent. And in that silence, confusion festers. No one explains to them that anger is often just unprocessed sadness, that their outbursts are a cry for clarity, not defiance. That their quietness isn't detachment, but fear of being misunderstood. Puberty brings with it a sense of displacement. Boys no longer feel like children, but they don't yet feel like men, and society doesn't give them room to figure it out. One moment they are being disciplined like little boys, and the next they are expected to carry themselves with the self-control of adult men. This inconsistency creates tension inside them. They start to question where they fit. Are they too old to cry, too young to lead, too sensitive to speak up, too tough to admit they're scared? These questions aren't spoken aloud, but they live rent-free in a boy's mind during puberty. Another overlooked aspect of puberty for boys is the way their sense of worth starts attaching itself to external validation. Suddenly, they care about how they look, how strong they are, how many friends they have.